Time now to take a look at what's making headlines in the international newspapers. Solange Mijan is with us for a full press review. Solange, we're going to kick off in the UK, well, with the story anyway, that it's launching its vaccination campaign.
It is indeed. And for the Scottish tabloid, the Daily Record, it is V-Day. V not as in victory, but V as in vaccine. Paper celebrates the fact that the United Kingdom is the first nation to have authorized and rolled out the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Now, it will be first administered in the UK to the elderly, to nursing home residents, and to their caregivers. For the Daily Mirror, the rollout of the vaccine is also quite a relief. The tabloid headlines are "Fight Back starts today." And it says the UK is taking a huge step forward after some 61,000 deaths, loss of livelihoods, sacrifices across the nation. But sacrifices and social distancing will have to continue until much of the population is vaccinated. And that is becoming abundantly clear in another nation, in France as well this morning. The regional French paper, La Dépêche du Midi, is all about frowning ornaments today. It laments that it is quite possible that France's lockdown will not be eased on December 15th, as many had hoped, as the president said was possible, potentially. Now, with an average of 10,000 new COVID cases every day, Libération notes that the nation is double the 5,000 case threshold that would, as Macron said, allow for an easing of France's restrictions. With the situation improving, but not as quickly as many had hoped, the paper wonders if holidaygoers' plans for Christmas and for New Year's are about to be undone. So for the moment, two very contrasting, two very different coronavirus outtakes coming from the French and the British press.
Absolutely. Well, contrasting viewpoints of France and the UK also being discussed in the press, but in regard to a very different topic, and it's Brexit talks.
Yes, it is Brexit as it continues. The Courrier International has culled articles from the British press about France's stance in the Brexit negotiations. The Paris-based site cites a dose or two of French bashing, with the British papers asking, quote, "What are you playing at Emmanuel Macron?" in regard to the French government, saying that they could veto a deal if it is a bad one. But, this is a big but, The Guardian, the British paper, notes that what's going on here with headlines like "Le bus stop" or "France derails Brexit talks" is just surface stuff, or a Franco-British rivalry tradition of pointing fingers. They say that what's actually going on, that France is far from alone in having its concerns. If it were alone, The Guardian says, talks would be much further along than they are already. It would be a done deal, the paper says. It notes that there may be a good cop, bad cop game going on between France and Germany, but that, quote, "plenty of countries are nervous," and that the main players have unity on the message and on the strategy, end quote.
Interesting. Well, the Times newspaper, meanwhile, also weighing in on the issue and what these negotiations may mean for the UK's future.
Yeah, quote, Who would want to deal with us after this? Is the question that a Times reporter asked, saying that while performances, or i.e. theatrics, are expected in the final hours of talks, Britain, quote, has lost its stature as a global player. That what's going on here is actually, quote, a psychodrama about the Conservative Party and its internal obsession with the EU, end quote. And the other thing the article says is that what is underlying everything is, quote, a misplaced belief that Britain's exceptionalism, end quote. This is coming from the Times of London. Nevertheless, a Franco-British brawl makes for good copy and for good cartoons, as we can see in Morton Moreland's cartoon of the Times, an armor and trident touting Boris and a Napoleon like Emmanuel, both of them with fish on their heads, saying, quote, "Don't be ridiculous."
Indeed, that fisheries question, one of the main sticking points that persists. Let's turn, Solange, to the United States. Joe Biden's plans to pick a retired General Lloyd Austin to lead the Department of Defense.
Yeah, Lloyd Austin would be, if he is indeed tapped and if he is indeed confirmed by the Senate to lead the Pentagon, he would be the first African-American man to run the Defense Department and its 1.3 million troops that are in active duty. Now, Politico tells us that at 67 and a former four-star general, Austin has already had a barrier-breaking career and a stellar record, that he's quite respected across the military. But that may actually actually be a problem, according to the New York Times. In an opinion piece, a former advisor to both Joe Biden and Mike Pence, so this is someone who does both Democrats and Republicans, argues that Lloyd Austin's recent retirement in 2016 from the military is too recent, that U.S. law stipulates that there needs to be an at least 7-year cooling off period to ensure that the person who runs the Pentagon, quote, isn't too cozy with friends still on active duty, end quote. Now, Biden is going to ask for an exception to this rule, but the Times argues that such a move, which is actually quite rare, it has proven in the past to be quite risky, and that a civilian or a long ago retired general should be a better choice instead.
Interesting. Finally, Solange, you found an article about pandas and what they like to roll in.
Yes, and what do they like to roll in? Well, it's not mud. They like to roll in poo. The Guardian tells us that pandas love to smear themselves with horse manure, and they do this for actually a good reason. They do this to try and stay warm. Now, it's not because the manure is warm itself, but it's because there are actually chemicals in this poo that actually helps them fight cold. So zookeepers are, but there's a problem. It could be linked. They could have salmonella in them. So zookeepers are trying to find a way to zap the poo so that they can put it into the keeps of the pandas.
Just the good things of it.
Yes.
Okay, Solange, interesting as always. Thanks a lot for that review of the